Welcome to the Unmuted Podcast. My name is Jeff Waldman, host of the podcast, also the founder of Scale HR. This is a podcast where we talk about all things HR tech, talent, world of work, and so on. And so we've been running these, episodes every week. So we drop a new episode every Thursday morning. And we've actually made a small change. They're actually a bit shorter now, so 15 to about 20 minutes, because I know that a lot of you don't want to hear my voice for 40 plus minutes. I get it. So all good. So we made them shorter. And so this episode here is a really special one. Before I get to that YouTube channel, just make sure that you hit the subscribe button so that you get notified of new episodes coming up and that get dropped. So this episode, Beyond Exit Interviews, Why Stay Interviews Are Your Secret Weapon. So it's a really interesting topic, actually, and I'll bring Heidi in shortly. But when I started talking to our guest about this, it's an area that I haven't really thought much about, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of people watching this episode may not have also thought about it as well. So, the cool thing about this topic area, well, not cool thing, but some interesting things is that it really got brought on as a result of the pandemic. Obviously, we're 4 years, past the start of the pandemic, and the COVID-19 pandemic changed, the face of business. Obviously, with the explosion of work technology, collaboration tools like Google Workspace, health concern, burnout, mental health, changing financial pressures, obviously dealing with inflation for the first time in decades, a rise in cost of living, and obviously caregiving and responsibility, both children, young people, but also older people, parents, and so forth. And then we saw this thing called the Great Resignation. It was sort of a thing that sort of came and went, increase in demand for labor and talent. And that just completely shifted the needs and wants of workers, obviously with the pandemic, working from home, remote work, and really a massive shift in what people wanted in work and personal life. We are still seeing, difficulties, obviously, with, attracting and hiring top talent. I don't think that's going to be going away anytime soon. This has been an issue that has plagued us for years. It's been stronger in certain years, less so in others. But ultimately, it's a never-ending problem. How we as organizations, regardless of sector, industry, to attract, engage, and then retain our top people. So there's a lot here to unpack, and I'm going to bring in Heidi Hauver. She's our guest here, and I just want to welcome you to the show.
Thanks for having me. I would say, Jeff, I was part of the Great Reimagination camp. I don't know if you've heard that, but I think it's a more positive spin about kind of some of the outcomes of the pandemic. And so I like to think of it as the Great Reimagination.
I like that. Hey, look, there's, different schools of thought out there. Obviously, you have your own school of thought, and, we're going to dive into that. So before we get into our actual topic about, stay interviews and so forth, can you give us a bit of an overview of your background, what you do?
Absolutely. So I'm an HR leader. I've spent 25 years of my career in HR in a variety of different sectors and organizations. I would say I like to think of myself as a community builder as well. Along my journey building my career in my day job, I've done a lot of work in the community as well. I'm always on. I'm very fortunate to be part of a lot of different committees and boards. And I think that that's definitely some of the most proud work I've done is sort of that part of the work that I do.
And you're based in the nation's capital.
In Ottawa, yes I am. I didn't grow up here, but I've spent most of my life here in Ottawa now. I work for an organization called Invest Ottawa, and we sort of term the notion that Ottawa is the best place to live, work, learn, and play. And so I would agree with that.
So this is not a political show at all. And some of you may know that I have very strong opinions when it comes to federal politics. I'm not going to make any comments here, but, for those of you that are not Canadian, might be elsewhere, Ottawa is our nation's capital. It's about 4.5 hours away from Toronto, maybe about less than an hour away, or 2 hours away from Montreal. Ottawa is a very beautiful place to go, and I'll be there soon. Obviously in a couple of weeks to see you. So my first question for you: what is the difference between a stay interview and then an exit interview?
So an exit interview, it is what it sounds like. Generally, it's an opportunity to connect with someone that is exiting your organization. And what's really interesting about exit interviews is I think, as HR leaders, we learn about them as we're kind of growing our careers and even from an academic perspective, then, at some point we start doing them. I have found over the years, I've had actual HR leaders say to me, ask me, are you still doing exit interviews? And my answer is always yes, because I'm always looking for an opportunity to learn, to grow, to get insights, to see if there's trending patterns. And I think that you need to be connecting with your people. Now, the difference between an exit interview and a stay interview is too often we are reactive and we're waiting for some of our best talent to be leaving the organization. And then we show an interest as to finding out what their thoughts are around some of the things we need to be improving. Think of a start, stop, continue, right? Where, what are the things we should start doing in our organization, continue doing and stop doing to keep you engaged and happy. And the time that a person is leaving the organization and is already signed up to join another company is not the time for them to be unpacking those insights. You don't get to benefit from them as much. And so the whole idea of a stay interview is I'm a big advocate. I think you need to keep doing your exit interviews. You'll get a different type of information, obviously, as people are leaving the organization, but don't wait. Create those opportunities to have those stay interviews with your top talent. Understand why they love working for you. Understand where you can continue to up your game. Help them be part of the solution on tackling some of the puzzles you have in your organization. No organization is perfect. We're all trying to do our very best. And the people working for your organization are they're going to have the best, investment and interest in helping you to kind of address some of those. So the idea of a stay interview is much more proactive, right? Like, think about it. Hey, I'm going to talk to Sally because Sally is like my top data scientist, my data analyst. I don't want Sally to leave. I need to understand what motivates Sally, what inspires her. And I've been doing something called setting expectations for success for years. It's always been part of what I bring to the table as a leader in terms of getting a sense of communication style, how somebody wants to get recognized, when I'm going to know someone's frustrated. For me, that's sort of, that conversation happens on the onset of the relationship. So there's no surprise when I'm leaning in to do stay interviews because they know naturally I'm going to be asking for feedback. How are we doing together? How am I doing as your leader? How are we doing as an organization holistically? And I think if you can embed these into your one-on-ones beyond the operational conversations that we have, where operations, we sit down every week, we have a one-on-one with our team member. And I go, Jeff, what's on your plate? What's going on the last 24 hours? What's on your plate for the next 4 or 5 days? Where are you at with your priorities, your goals, etc.? I would add in there, Jeff, how are you doing? What work are you doing that you're really excited about? Is there anything you're working on that you're not currently working on that you'd like to? What's your growth pathway look like? What's your professional development look like for the year? This could be an unofficial stay interview because I'm truly finding an opportunity to connect with you beyond the last 24 hours and the next 48. And I'm looking at, are you engaged, meeting your satisfaction levels and your role in our team? This is really important. And I think the more proactive you can be, there is no surprises. Because guess what? We're going to cultivate a relationship where I'm the first person you come to talk to when you say, you know what? I'm not reaching my full potential. And I go, okay, well, let's work on trying to get you that full potential here. And maybe, Jeff, you know what? You're not going to reach your full potential here. And we work on that together. And at some point you spread your wings and I actually help you do that as your leader. And so I'm a big believer in cultivating, really just enhancing the communication you're having with your team. I think stay interviews are a huge opportunity for.
So I think you said a bunch of things there. One, one of my sort of follow-on questions was the stay interview isn't really a standalone sort of thing that sort of sits over here. It's actually embedded into what a lot of organizations are already doing, which is having, one-on-one, ongoing one-on-one, focus on things like engagement and goal setting and all that kind of stuff. But I guess maybe what you're saying is that it's more of a mindset shift. And I agree with you. The exit interview was always used as sort of like a reactive thing. You already passed that boat. Like that ship sailed.
Yes.
You've lost them already. So why would you anyway? So really interesting. So I wanted to ask you about, and I'll just sort of frame this question, but what is the purpose of conducting a stage interview? And then when should you do them? And then how can they benefit both the employees and the company? You kind of talked about that already, but maybe just quickly add to what you were saying. Really.
So when should you do them? Always. Like it should be incorporated into your regular connects with your people all the time. Like I don't think you can do them enough, in my humble opinion. I think part of our roles as leaders and helping to enable people to be doing their best work, right? And be their best selves is opening up those lines of communication. And I think, I think that can be different. It doesn't have to be your direct manager. I love the idea of skip levels as well, right?
Yeah,
That idea that if I work for you, you're actually talking to my people and you're kind of going over me intentionally with my awareness to actually build a relationship.
With your awareness, right?
Yeah, with my awareness, right? Understanding that you want to connect with your team, right? Like they're part of your team as well. So I love skip levels too, because it gives you an opportunity to have those stay interviews. It can happen at all levels of the organization. I love the idea about getting a sense of, having that reflection exercise where you're like, Jeff, you know what? You've been with the company for 2 years. Why did you originally join ABC Company? And why are you satisfied now? Like, what are you really excited about here? Like, part of the insights also need to be shared. And I think a lot of us are probably doing exit interviews and stay interviews in some way, shape, or form, but we're not sharing it. I think that's a missed opportunity. And I think that that's where we can kind of look at what are some trends and really interesting insights that we may be able to learn from across the different divisions, departments, and be able to learn from that. And so I think I'm a bit of a data geek, I've worked for some really cool data companies. And as a technology kind of HR leader, I've learned the importance of being able to make informed decisions. And a lot of the insights we can get from having conversations with our people can help us drive better business results, help us enhance our practices and our processes and our services and our products just by engaging with our team and asking them, in some ways to be part of the solution. So I love the question too, listen, when you joined Jeff, the organization 4 years ago, is this what you expected? And I love that conversation because some people will go, actually, it's not what I expected. And initially you're like, uh-oh. And those are the coolest conversations because they may say, it's beyond what I expected. I'm in this role now. I didn't expect to be in this role, or I've learned this, or I'm doing this. And so, be curious. I'm a big believer in, I think part of our role as leaders is great questions, hone those active listening skills, and be curious, lean in and get your people to kind of connect with you.
So you talked about some questions. Are there any other questions that you would, recommend that people ask?
So I know this is going to sound really funny, but I love to ask, Jeff, is there any questions you'd like me to ask you that I haven't asked yet? So the reason I love that question at the very end of a conversation is somebody may be waiting for me to ask a very specific question, and I want to give them the platform to be able to have that conversation with me. And if I didn't ask them a question around professional development or total rewards or something that they really want to talk about, I want to make sure that I open the door for them. So that is a question that I love to ask at the end is, hey, is there anything that you wanted to explore together that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet? And that right there can open the door to something that maybe you didn't even anticipate or proactively kind of consider. And so take the pressure off you as a leader. You don't need to have every question perfectly articulated. You can give the floor to your team and say, what do you want to talk about? And is there something that, you want to explore together in this conversation that, we haven't yet? You'd be surprised the cool conversations that can come up from that.
I've got a follow-on question to that because obviously the dynamic between manager and employee is a really complicated one. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of psychological elements there. And as we were talking about earlier, business has changed. We're now not face-to-face in person in an office anymore, really. There's a lot of other factors, burnout, mental health. And I think all of that kind of culminates to the point that I think there is a heightened level of mistrust between the manager and, the employee. And so from my perspective, if a leader or a manager is going to be asking questions and that trust or the credibility is broken, it doesn't really matter what you ask them. You're going to have a difficult time. So I'm just wondering what conditions have to be present in order for this to really work, because you're asking them to give you a lot of information and people may not be totally comfortable giving information if that relationship is fractured. So I don't know if you understand.
I totally get that. Yeah. Jeff, I don't know about you, but I've never walked into an organization where HR was trusted. I've always had to gain that respect of the team and demonstrate trust, build credibility. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight. And remember, I think you can't take it personally. Someone may have a pre-existing difficult experience that they carry with them. And so I think first and foremost, create the conditions where you are not spinning these random questions at people without explaining your intention, right? I think it's got to be well intended. I think you've got to be clear about your interest in having some of these conversations. Most importantly, what are you going to do with the information? And I think building trust is really critical. I've been doing stay interviews forever. And I mean, I don't call them a stay interview. I'm connecting regularly with my people. I'm gathering insights. I'm gathering information that I'm sharing. I'm not saying, hey, did you know Jeff told me this yesterday? It doesn't matter where it came from. It's that I'm picking up on a theme here that, 4 or 5 people have now told me this. I think this is something we need to explore further. We talked in your opening about engagement, satisfaction. Every organization I know and that I'm working with right now as a fractional HR leader is looking to engage their team, enhance collaboration after years of being distributed. And, everybody's trying to find a kind of the new pathway forward of what the world of work look like. I think it comes down to strong communications. And within those communications, you're absolutely right. It's about building that trust and that transparency. I find, and I'm sure you'll resonate with this, most people really open to giving feedback. They stop giving feedback when they don't understand what you did with that feedback you gave them, and if there's no actions towards kind of improvement.
I think that's a big one.
I think people are very realistic. They don't expect you to change everything. But I also think it's important for us as leaders to say, we hear you here, and we hear you saying this. We're not in a position to make that change. However, here's what we're going to commit to. And I'm a big believer that, if you're going to ask people for feedback, you owe them you're responsible and you owe them the respect to be able to circle back and showcase, a collective kind of vision of what did you find out and what are you now going to do with that information? I think that's really critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And that segues into my next question, because obviously the conditions have to be such that the person has to feel comfortable that the organization has, the right intention, right? Mm-hmm. So what are some actionable steps or recommendations that organization can take based on the insight that they gain from these interviews?
So I love being as transparent as possible. I think it's actually easier over time when you're trying to not hide things. No one expects everything to be perfect. So I'm a big believer in collecting information, data, looking at trends and patterns, and then sharing that. And then when sharing, listen, in the last roadshow the leadership team did, we identified 3 themes. And the themes are, you're looking for more opportunities to connect in person. You're looking for ways to enhance the tools sets that we're using. We're not maximizing the ROI on some of our tech tools. We're looking for more opportunities to come together and do something for the community from a CSR perspective. Let's say those 3 things. And then showcasing, okay, now what we're going to do is maybe the leadership team needs to lean in and bring together a group of people that are going to help create a solution to some of those puzzles. Maybe it's just a roadmap of saying we're not in a position to work on these 2 things, but we're going to commit to this. I just think being open and giving clarity as to kind of what you're going to do with the information. It might be we can't do anything right now, but we're going to put this on the roadmap for Q4. And this is what we're going to do at that point. I just think that, at the end of the day, people are going to stop giving you feedback if you don't do the feedback loop, right? People want the feedback.
No, for sure. They're going to think that it's sort of like a waste of time. Like, why am I doing this, right? So.
And I'm sure you've heard this. I've heard this so many times, I'm done giving feedback because every time I give feedback, nothing happens.
Yeah,
and
nothing happens.
Really, at the end of the day, they deserve the respect of the team to at least understand, where did that information go? It didn't just go into the kind of the twilight zone. We took this feedback. These are the insights we gained from it. And I think a lot of people hesitate to kind of lean out like that because they think, oh, it's a lot of work. But guess what?
Yeah.
If you don't invest in your people, if you're not leaning in and trying to find ways to better engage with them and to open up those channels of communication, you're not going to have a team. We do not have this without people. And I think that it's a small investment. And I'm not talking about, I'm a big believer in utilizing technology and tools. And there's some really amazing ones out there. You can be a 10-person team and you can do what I'm talking about in a very basic foundational way, still get incredible results. And so don't put those roadblocks on yourself that, I don't have money or I don't have the time. You need to make the time. You need to have curate intentional opportunities to connect with your team. And ideally, enable them to be part of the solution by creating an environment, as you said, that's safe, where they're willing to lend their ideas and there's an openness to that. I think that is really, when you peel back the onion about satisfaction and the most engaged teams, there are opportunities for those people to partake in the broader success of the business.
So you mentioned technology. So tech is always, so my years go up. And so are there any tools that you use to help you with that?
So I'm, like many HR leaders, have had to be scrappy because there's not large budgets necessarily always
Right.
that we want to get access to. I've been scrappy and done everything from using like Google and Teams, creating just like simple kind of platforms where we can kind of dump information and do polls. And I've used more sophisticated, more expensive platforms where I'm leading into subject matter expertise of a specific tool. I think that, to be candid, Jeff, I feel like when I've had to be the most innovative and creative, it's when I've done my best work. And sometimes the scrappier route, doing my own thing with, has kind of sometimes got better outcomes than using the bigger platforms.
Yeah.
And again, I think it depends on the situation. For me, it always depends on the company. And I think introducing a new tool isn't possible for everyone. So what can you work with what you have already? I would argue, and you probably appreciate where I'm going, I don't think we fully maximize the tools that we use always at 100% capacity. So if you already have an HRIS system or a learning and development tool or a performance management tool, there's probably something already in one of those tools that you can utilize to augment this work that you want to do. Don't recreate the wheel. Go and look with what you have access to right now, and then lean in and use some of those tools to build that momentum, right? To show that potential. And before you go asking for another tool to do this kind of thin slice of work, I would say leverage the tools you have. And I certainly have over my time, what tools am I using? What capabilities do they have that I'm not accessing now? And how can I better utilize that? Bamboo HR, as an example, is a tool that a lot of small and mid-sized businesses use. And they recently, over the last few years, implemented on top, above and beyond their ENPS, the Net Promoter Score, they added an employee satisfaction module that sort of measures well-being and satisfaction on a monthly or quarterly basis. And it's a great tool where you can really get a pulse of what's going on in the organization. A lot of people listening to the podcast probably are using Bamboo. They may not even know that exists yet. It's probably part of their package, maybe. It's something you can look at. All the big ATS now have these type of add-on supports that can help you do a broader view from a pulse kind of stay interview survey type, initiative to kind of giving you some tools and resources to have more direct one-on-ones.
This podcast is not about promoting any particular tool or not, but I do have very strong views when it comes to HR tech. So if anybody has any questions, you can always ask me. Last question for you. If there's one thing that the viewers can actually learn from everything that we've talked about today, what is that one thing?
Reflect on the last week and count how many times you had a true connect with one of your team members that was beyond just operational. And if you are having a hard time in this last review of the week, and are struggling to kind of find an opportunity where you kind of connected with your team member beyond just an operational chat, then I highly encourage you to find some time next week to book it could be 30 minutes. I have this idea, 30 minutes every 30 days, 30-30. I brought that into many organizations. And the whole idea, Jeff, is take 30 minutes every 30 days to find that connection with someone. That might be about their professional development pathway. That might be a brainstorm with them on some of the goals or some of the roadblocks they're facing with one of the goals that they're wanting to achieve this quarter. It's beyond the operational last 24, next 48. And it's, again, curating that relationship, opening up those lines of communication, and just being really intentional about it and making it a habit. These are really important leadership habits that I think we all
That's a good point. It needs to be scheduled. And if you schedule it, don't keep putting it off, because that does more damage, doing good, because it demonstrates that you don't really care about it.
Totally.
Well, Heidi, thank you. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your insight. We will share Heidi's contact information in our summaries when we post and publish this podcast episode, just to remind everyone, these podcasts, new episodes are dropped every Thursday morning, and we talk about all things talent, HR tech, and the world of work. And don't forget to smash that subscribe button so that you get notified. God, I sound like a sales guy. So smash it so you get notified, and also share your comments too, please. I want to hear from you. And if you have any questions for Heidi, you can always, contact me or contact her directly. But I want to thank you for being here.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me in.